Brut, New Art on Stage.
Welcome to the 7th podcast of Gesellschaftsspiele, The Art of Assembly. This episode is based on a live event on September 14th, 2021 in Halle G in Vienna during Wiener Festwochen, and it was in front of a full house with more than 300 people in the auditorium, the very first edition of Art of Assembly that could take place in front of an analog audience, which is of course quite paradoxical for a series that deals with physical bodily gatherings. If you have missed the series so far, you might want to check out our website, www.art-of-assembly.net, with videos and podcasts of all former editions. There you can also sign up for our newsletter if you want to be kept updated. My name is Florian Malzacher, and I'm the host of this series, which is conceived together with Brut Production House in Vienna. In this edition, with the title Agonistic Gatherings, my guests are the sociologist and philosopher Didier Eribon and the political theorist Chantal Mouffe. The discussion took place, almost to the day, at the 10th anniversary of Occupy Wall Street, a movement that, just as many other square occupations, demonstrations, revolts and revolutions during the last 10 years, as different as they were, have produced a lot of hope, energy and discussions, but also a lot of frustration and often very bad experiences with reactionary backlashes, as we have witnessed not only in Egypt, for example. These movements also had quite an impact on the art scene, on performance and theater makers that were inspired by it throughout the last decade. And this is what we try to reflect on in the series and to speculate about: the potential of assemblies in activism, politics, and art. So in our last edition that was happening in June before the summer break, we were discussing with Rade de Souza and Sibylle Peters assemblies of more than humans, of animals, landscapes, and so on. And today we move back very much to human beings at the center, or the protagonists of assemblies again. And we arrive at the topic that actually was appearing in the last editions again and again, but we didn't have time really to get into deeper into it, because we're not only to look at the likeness of members of assemblies, what everybody has in common with each other, but also at differences and dissent. Because the assemblies of these numerous square occupations and movements during the last decades have often been laboratories of radical forms of democracy, experimenting with non-hierarchical forms and structures of consensus models instead of majority voting. And while this is an important feature, we should also not forget the necessity of dissensus, of agonistic pluralism, as Chantal Mouffe would say, or the unsurpassable plurality, as Eribon says, of many movements. So tonight we will discuss how much agonism social movements can bear and how the diversity of democratic demands can be addressed. And for this, Chantal Mouffe and Didier Eribon are, of course, perfect guests, because they are not only theorists, but also closely related to the struggles of our times. And Chantal, you call yourself sometimes an intellectual activist or an activist with words, and I think that's also, this description goes well also for Didier Eribon. So Chantal Mouffe's concepts have been frequently popped up in our conversations, and her name for many reasons. Some of them would be her stressing that affects and not only rationality are important for assemblies. So an assembly is also an experience, a passionate experience, and as with Occupy Wall Street, for example, even though Chantal Mouffe criticizes these movements then for other reasons. But also the concept of the chain of equivalence is important, the necessity to create a common will, including very different and often overlapping demands of workers, women, the decolonization movements, environment, LGBTQ, etc. So if we want to be assemblies too successful, and I'm sure Chantal will talk about it, or we talk in the talk later about it. But last not least, and that gave this edition its title, the concept of agonism. So the necessity to have an arena where we can act out different opinions as adversaries and not as enemies, and not only aim for a consensus in all these movements. Didier Eribon, I think what was really interesting for me is also, and for many, of course, is how he combines his writing, theoretical depth, with personal experiences, so that he himself stays visible in his books and the position from which he speaks and the context. And I think that's also an important moment for our series, so to always understand the individuum in a social context, also in the assembly. So what is this relationship to each other? And you also stress in your writing the importance of the struggles of minorities, discriminated groups, etc., but also put a focus on the often in the left forgotten working class, and we will, I guess, we'll discuss this, of course, later on. So the evening will be like this, that first Chantal Mouffe will speak for about 20 minutes, then Didier Eribon, and then we have a discussion, and we also open the discussion for everybody. And then it's important to use the microphone, because we also streamed. So Chantal Mouffe is Professor Emeritus of Political Theory at the Center for Study of Democracy at the University of Westminster in London. She wrote and edited many books, and I just want to mention the most important ones, next to the iconic Hegemony and Socialist Strategy with Ernesto Laclau in 1985. I just mentioned the three most recent ones, which also all are important for our topic of assembly in general. So that's Agonistic, Thinking the World Politically from 2013, with also a critique of Occupy Wall Street. Podemos, In the Name of the People, with Inigo Eribon in 2016. And maybe we talk also a bit about Podemos today. And for Left Populism, the last book from 2019. And I'm supposed to mention that there's a book table in the foyer, so you can probably get all of these books outside later on if you don't have them. And as I said, your writing has been a reference point in the series often already, but also I'm very happy that we had an ongoing conversation, actually since an assembly that took part in Graz 9 years ago at Steirischer Herbst, Truth is Concrete, and so I'm really happy to have you here and to talk. And just maybe I should mention, for all of us, it's the first public appearance since, 1.5 years. I think you had one last year maybe, but so it's really a premiere, and we're very glad to have you. And Chantal, I would just offer you the chair, or the lectern.
Thank you, Florian. Yes, I do confirm that it's the first time I speak in public since February last year. And I must say I'm really pleased that it is in Vienna because, well, not everybody, but a lot of people know how I love Vienna, and also in the context of the Wiener Festwochen and something organized by Florian and discussing with Didier Eribon. So I'm many reasons to be happy that this is my first public intervention. Well, I think that maybe I'm going to be a little bit of a dissenting voice here with respect of, some position. But I think that was maybe one of the reasons also why Florian wanted to invite me. But first, I'm going to speak as a political theorist, but as a political theorist, I always do political theory thinking of activism, so it's not just political theory for itself, but so what can political theory tell us about, of how we should act politically? So it's definitively, of course, I'm going to concentrate on political assemblies, because obviously there are many assemblies of many different types, and not all of them are about politics. And I also want to insist that when I'm using the term assemblies, but I suppose this has been the case already in a large sense. For instance, for me, demonstration, are part of assembly. So it's not only, meeting together in a place, and it's not only occupation of square. I've got a much wider understanding of assemblies. And I'm going to raise two particular issues respecting to assemblies. First, concerning consensus, and the second one concerning question of affects, the role of affects in assemblies. The question of consensus, dissensus, obviously. Well, as we know, they are not the only form of assemblies, but the one which has been more celebrated and which have been the center of many of the discussion here are the Occupy Wall Street, Indignados in Spain, Nuit debout in France, and all those are celebrated. They've got something in common, is the idea, they emphasize the idea of consensus. You know, what is important for them is a place where consensus can, be created among, of course, people meeting together. So what they have in common is usually rejection of the idea of representative democracy, a defense of direct democracy. Also, they are very horizontalist movement. No, they don't want to have any form of hierarchy. Most of them don't want even to have spokesperson, and obviously they don't want to have any contact with the more traditional form of politics. This is usually what those kind of assemblies insist on. Well, here I want to insist. Those assemblies, in fact, they partake of one specific conception of the political, which is has been called the associative conception of political. That is, meaning the political is the space of acting in common, is a space of liberty, is the space where we should try to establish consensus, but definitively not the space when there is space for antagonism. So I think that's important to realize, because obviously I'm going to defend another view of the political. If we are thinking of relation with political theorists, and being a political theorist, I want to make that contact, and they partake also of a certain conception of democracy. Because obviously the question of democracy and how we are going to establish democracy, what is the aim of democracy, is central to those. And this is, speaking of political theory, they partake of what is called the deliberative conception of democracy. Here I want to insist that there might, in the field of deliberative democracy, there are different forms. For instance, maybe one of deliberative democracy, which is better known, is the theory that is developed by Jürgen Habermas, but also by Jean Rawls. And basically what their democracy said, the aim is to establish procedure in order to reach a consensual consensus. A consensus, let's say, that maybe is kind of a pleonasm to speak of consensual consensus, but here I want to say a consensus without any form of exclusion, because I think one can think of consensus, but consensus for me always excludes some people. And in fact, obviously, this is the assemblyism, as it's sometimes called. This is not exactly, this kind of deliberative democracy, because the assemblies, as I said before, they want direct democracy. But basically, what they have in common is their idea that the aim of democracy is to establish consensus. The difference, of course, is going to reside in the fact, how are we going to establish this consensus? For the assemblyism view is through direct democracy. This is not, of course, the idea that we find in other forms of deliberative democracy. We say, no, it's true, obviously, the procedures that are advocated by Rawls and Habermas are not direct democracy. But basically what they've got in common is that the aim of democracy is to establish consensus. Well, this is exactly the kind of position which I criticize in all of my work, and which is, when I've developed the idea of an agonistic democracy, in fact, it is a model which is precisely an alternative and a critique of deliberative democracy. And, in fact, the kind of view of the political that I defend is a view which has been called the dissociative conception of the political. That is, it's a view of the political that says that society is always necessarily divided. Politics is always partisan. Politics is the establishment of a frontier, a difference between us and them. This is something which is really very important for the dissociative conception of the political. So if there is the political, it's because there is antagonism. Here I want to specify that by antagonism, what I refer to is certain type of conflict, because it's a type of conflict that cannot have a rational solution. And I think this is precisely the kind of conflict which is the political conflict. Many conflicts can have a solution, but there are some which cannot, and those are the political ones. And this is what, if there is politics, it's because there is this dimension of the political, which is called the antagonistic dimension of the political. So if you start from this conception of dissociative view, of course you are going to envisage the aim of democracy in a very different way. It's not to establish consensus, because there is no possibility ever of a fully rational consensus, but it is, I've put it in a way, we've got to really start, there is antagonism, How is democracy going to be possible if we acknowledge the ineradicability of antagonism? Well, Habermas said that's not possible. If we want to defend democracy, we've got to abandon the idea that antagonism is ineradicable. And I said, no, there is a way to defend democracy starting from this antagonistic conception, and is to realize that this antagonistic dimension can be put into shape, into form in different ways. They can be put into form, antagonism, but being constructed as a friend and enemy distinction. And then, of course, this is incompatible with the organization of democracy, because if you are going to treat your opponent as somebody to be destroyed, because the enemy, you want to destroy it, this is incompatible with democracy. But there is another way in which antagonism can be put into form, into shape. It is under the form of what I call agonism, and this is the opponent is not going to be considered as an enemy to be destroyed, but as what I call an adversary. That is, of course, we know we are not ever going to be able to reach a consensus, but there is, we consider that the opponent has got a right to defend his position, her position. And this is, so for me, really what should be the aim of democracy, to create the condition, the institutions, so that when those antagonistic conflicts are going to emerge, they are the institutions which are going to make it possible, this antagonism, this agonism to be put into an agonistic form. So this is why I say that it is to transform antagonism into agonism. There is a very nice formulation, but I will have to say it in French because it does not give so well in English. It's an expression from the important French anthropologist, historian, anthropologist, Marcel Mauss. And Marcel Mauss, speaking of democracy, say the whole question is how can we s'opposer sans se massacrer? In English, but you realize it doesn't. So, to oppose without killing each other. Yeah, this is the meaning. But I think I like this expression, s'opposer sans se massacrer, because this is exactly what the agonistic struggle is about, and this, I think, for me, is what democracy should try to reach, establish the institutions that are going to allow for this s'opposer sans se massacrer. Okay, so what has got that to do with the question of assemblies? Well, I think that, of course, there is also the idea of assemblies can also be important for the agonistic conception of democracy and of that I developed, because then, of course, assemblies are going to be envisaged as the place where antagonism can be transformed into agonism, where people are going to be able to meet, to discuss, to confront opinion, and then to precisely this putting antagonism into an agonistic shape. I think it can be done through assemblies, and this is, in my view, what will be the role of assemblies. And here I want to insist on something which it should be the aim establish the condition for what I call an agonistic conception of citizenship. Because there is a view which many people believe, to act as a citizen is to act in an homogeneous way. If we will all to act as citizen, then we will all agree. Well, I don't agree with that conception. I think that there are many different ways in which we can act as a citizen. There is a plurality of form. And for instance, one can, I think there are, I would even say neoliberal citizen, social democratic citizen, radical democratic citizen. All those forms are legitimate. And in fact, the agonistic struggle is precisely a struggle among these different understanding of citizenship. So this is for the first question. Assemblies are basically tending to consensus or dissensus. The question of affects, no. Well, affects are important for both types of assemblies because, of course, the question of people meeting in as bodies, and of course, this is a question where affects are mobilized. Affects are mobilized both by, consensual assemblies and by agonistic one, but of course they are mobilized in different ways. So I think that for me is very important. As I was saying before, if you envisage assemblies and the place people meet, discuss, oppose, and so, well, obviously this is Gubinan because, and it's possible because there are places where affects are mobilized, I want to give you now a few examples of what I envisage, what I will call agonistic assemblies. Because in fact, normally people say, if you think of Occupy Wall Street, Indignados, Mi Debout, those are not agonistic assemblies. Those are assemblies in which basically the aim is to really reach a consensus. This is why, for instance, those, and this is very clear in when people say about their movement, they don't want any kind of things that are going to divide them. For instance, if they vote for person, they don't want anything which is hierarchical. They don't want even to formulate demands. They don't want to have voting because, if we are going to vote, that's going to divide people. So all those practices which they say can divide people are not important. They are, in fact, really opposed and by those consensual assemblies. While this is, of course, not the case in agonistic assemblies. Agonistic assemblies recognize that they are never going to be a way to agree, but so we need to have procedure for disagreeing and make judgment. So I think that's very important to realize that agonistic assemblies need to have some form in which the dissensus can be expressed. Well, kind of example of that, I was thinking, well, there is, and this is where I think the question of demonstration is important, because obviously when you, maybe people will come with other example of that, but for me I think that demonstration is precisely a place where you can bring people together with different objectives. And there is an example which probably many people here know about. It's a very, not very old, but probably if you've seen the film Pride, you will have heard about the way in which in Britain during Margaret Thatcher, during the struggle of the miners, there was, the gay movement went to work and have demonstration and things to go with the miners. Well, for me, this is exactly an example of an agonistic assemblies. When you have people from very different objectives, the aim was certainly not, establish some kind of homogeneous thing, but to establish some kind of solidarity between different forms of struggle. So I think that for me is an example of an agonistic movement. More recently, next to now, for instance, I think the feminist strike, the one in Spain, but also, of course, very much in Latin America, in Argentina, in Chile, are a form of agonistic assemblies. Because what is really interesting about those movements is they are not movements that are only organized around, specific woman issue. For instance, to give you the example of Argentina, where, as you probably know, the struggle for, legalization of abortion was very, very central to the movement, and they had the pañuelo verde, as a sign of that. But in those demonstrations, it was not only about that. They were articulating a series of other demands coming from, working class people, gay people, and so there was a locus for an agonistic encounter between those different groups. I also think, for instance, for me, Extension Rebellion is probably one of the best examples of what I understand by an agonistic assembly. Because the aim of Extension Rebellion is not, to create a consensus. It's very different. But it's to, suscitate. There are people who participate coming from very different point of view and very different, origin. But and it's to suscitate a discussion, to suscitate, of course, there is something in common, but it is really trying to establish unity among differences. So I think that is for me, at the moment, Extinction Rebellion is really an example of what I understand by agonistic assembly. I also would like to make a reference to something that, more recent in France, which I also think a very good example of an agonistic movement, is the way in which, for instance, there were, that was of course before the pandemic, but joint demonstration in which you had Comité Adama, people coming from the gilets jaunes, and also people from the ecological movement. And they were demonstrating together. I think that is really interesting, this kind of thing, because it's a kind of articulation of different demands. It was not, again, a question of, each of having, we will all agree. The Comité Adama has got his demand, and Gilets jaunes too, but, they were creating a way in which some form of solidarity can be created between, or among different struggles. And of course, this is why I think that this question of agonistic assemblies, for me, is very important for what I call the articulation of a chain of equivalence, which is central to my reflection about politics. Because I think that articulation of a chain of equivalence is precisely the way there are many different struggles in our societies. We need to create some kind of collective will if we want to transform society. But this collective will is not some homogeneous collective will in which, all those groups are going to leave aside their differences. No, there is the question is how are we going precisely to create some form of solidarity between all those different struggles, which in a way in which their specificity is going to be maintained, but they find the way to work together. And I think that, thinking of joint demonstration between Comité Adama, Gilets jaunes, and ecological movement is really a very good example of that. And this is why, of course, for me, and you will expect me to make the connection with left populism, I suppose, those agonistic assemblies are very important for a strategy of left populism. Because what is at stake in left populism is to create this collective will, to create this chain of equivalence between all those different struggles. And of course, I always very much insist on the importance of mobilizing affect. Because if there are two characteristics which are central for left populism is first establish a frontier, us, them. So collective will, and of course the Dutch, we call it the people against the oligarchy. Some people don't like the term people, but the people here is basically, to say that it's a transversal subject. That is what is at stake. And of course, this is why to create this transversality, agonistic assemblies are very important. And of course, and I'm going to finish with this point, it also indicates that what are different conception of radical politics are at stake in the consensual Occupy Wall Street kind of movement and the agonistic one. Because in the case of the horizontal movement, basically it's a strategy which in agonistic I call withdrawal from. They don't want to have anything to do with state institution, with parties. There is the self-organization of the multitude, purely horizontal. Nothing to do with institution. While the strategy, which is of radical politics, which is specific to the left populism, is a strategy that I call engagement with institution. Engagement with institution to transform them profoundly. So it means that you are going to establish a synergy between the horizontal, because I think horizontal is absolutely crucial, and those movements are crucial, but they need to establish an articulation with the more vertical dimension, so to be involved, in politics transforming the state. And in fact, this is what I think has been missing. In Indignados, in Occupy Wall Street, and in Nuit Debout, because this refusal to engage with the institution to transform it, okay, it existed, but they did not have really important impact. So I think it's very important to see the importance of the articulation between those, two different forms of assemblies. This is what, for me, is what is missing in the kind of Occupy Wall Street Indignados, and what I want to bring about when I speak of agonistic form of assemblies, and the kind of strategy which I develop on the basis of what I call a left populist strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will have a lot to discuss in a moment, but first I'm very happy that Didier Eribon is here and also do the formal introduction. Didier Eribon is a sociologist and philosopher. He was professor of sociology in Amiens and visiting professor at the University of California and many other places. His socio-autobiography book, Retour à Reims, Return to Reims, probably many of you have read, in which he reveals the breakup of French society attracted international attraction. And I find it always quite interesting because the translation to German was quite late, like 5, 6, 7 years later. And I think it hit the right moment. It was maybe good that it took so long because it really arrived in a very important moment. Other books are The Insult and the Making of the Gay Self from 1999. It has become a classic and founding document of queer studies, and among his most recent publications are La Société comme Verdict, Gesellschaft als Urteil, und Prinzip d'une pensée critique, which also is published in German, but I think not in English yet. There's the book table outside. I say it again, as I'm supposed to do, and I'm very happy you're here.
Thank you. I did like the quotation by Marcel Mauss that Chantal has mentioned. Democracy is to oppose to each other without killing each other. But it reminds us that actually state violence kill opponents or massacre them. And I have to remind you, but that under Macron, 30 people lost an eye, 6 lost a hand, hundreds of demonstrators have been mutilated, severely wounded. Thousands have been imprisoned for having, for example, eye drops in their pocket, which was considered an intent to participate in violent demonstration. Thousands have been asphyxiated by tear gas. I was there, and I can tell you that it's not very pleasant. And now someone like me is scared to go to a demonstration in France. So, actually, democracy is not a democracy. It is state violence exerted against demonstrators, against opponents by the state powers and its police forces. So this is why I do not sorry, I'm cold because of the air condition. This is why I do not accept the idea of consensus. This is why I do not accept the idea of discussion, political discussion, and why I would plea for a radical political resistance to the state violence, to the economic violence, political violence, social violence. I said massacre because people have been mutilated or severely wounded and horribly mutilated. But it was during demonstration. But if you read Edouard Louis' novel Who Killed My Father, you can see that this political, social, economic violence is an ongoing process. And Who Killed His Father is, he gave the list of the politicians, but this Macron, Sarkozy, Hollande, left-wing, right-wing, who deprive people of their rights, of the basic means of existence through their neoliberal agenda and politics. But it's not only political violence, it's also depriving people of the right to speak, of the right to protest. They are subjugated by the laws, the regulation, the reforms, and they are silenced by police repression when they want to protest. So, for me, or the notion of consensus, even the notion of democracy, to be criticized radically. And I would like, exactly like Chantal, it's the first time that I speak in front of a public within 2 years, and I have to do that in English, so I'm sorry. I lost my practice of speaking English. I have to ask you to forgive me if there's some mistake. In her famous book in 1949, The Second Sex, Simone de Beauvoir wonders why women do not say we as women. The workers say we, black people in the US say we, Jews have been saying we for a long time. These are the examples she gave in the introduction of her book. In short, there are several social, political, cultural movements in which a category of people, a group, speaks collectively as a group, for themselves as subjects of their own discourses, and not only anymore as object of the discourses of the others. Women, she wrote, remain the object of the masculine gaze, of the masculine discourses. There is a social hierarchy, and that in that hierarchy, the inferiorized one, they are the others. The women are the inferiorized one. They are the other. They are the second. The word is telling second sex. I will not discuss here. There are so many things which are at stake in these few sentences I quoted by Simone de Beauvoir. I will not discuss here all the implication, but neither existentialist framework, neither existentialist vocabulary, the other, the gaze, and so on, subject-object. But what I would like to insist on is how she tries to explain this enduring and apparently accepted by women situation of subjugation, of inferiorization. She writes, "It is because working women will always feel closer to workers, male workers, in solidarity with male workers in the working class movement. Black women will always feel closer to black men in solidarity with them in the black movement, anti-racist movement, and so on." So the condition for the existence of a we, that is to say for a group speaking collectively for themselves as a group, is to change the social and political perceptions of the world and to add a new or another theoretical way of dividing the social world. They are the working class, they are the black, they are the Jew, and we have to add the women as a principle of perceiving the division of the social world. But to do that, of course, you cannot simply add a category, a principle of division. All these principles of divisions tend or intend to become hegemonic and to become the main principle of division, the main framework to not only understand the social world, but to build the reality. If you say there are workers and bourgeois, there are social classes, the world is divided between social classes. If you say there are men and women, this is another division. And every movement will tend to impose its division as the most important one. So, when now we can say that Simone de Beauvoir wanted the women to say we has been listened to, has been heard, and women say we, which is another problem, that the we, as you know as well as I know, the we is not homogeneous. The we of the women, the feminist movement is not, of course, a homogeneous movement. There are tensions, contradictions, opposition inside this we, as we have saw in Paris very recently, where different trends of the feminist movement physically clashed between themselves in the streets of Paris. The anti-transgender rights against the Antifa supporting the transgender, or the the ones wanting to abolish prostitution, so to punish the client of sex workers, and the sex workers wanting to fight for their rights, social security, pension, and so on. So the feminist movement, the we that Simone de Beauvoir was imagining, is a very, very unhomogeneous, heterogeneous we, divided and sometimes violently divided. But this is another issue. Every movement tends to be hegemonic and interpret the world through its own lens, its own framework. The theoretical framework which a way of perceiving the social reality, which is a way of perceiving reality, becomes the reality itself. Through the whole set of institutions it creates: associations, trade unions, demonstrations, books, journals, reviews, and so on. This is what Pierre Bourdieu, the famous French sociologist, called the theory effect, l'effet de théorie. There are social classes in the reality because Karl Marx said that there were social classes. And we see social classes because someone built a theory saying there are social classes. The social world is made of this opposition, this struggle between social classes, and that we could interpret the past and the present as, famous sentence, the history of social classes. The working class movement was inscribed in the reality of social classes, framed by the Marxist theory of social classes. The reality has been performatively construed by this theory. And this implementation, this inscription of this embodiment of the theory in the reality. As you know, the shift of the left-wing, traditional social democratic left-wing to the right in the 1980s, and the successful attempt by left-wing, so-called left-wing, as well as right-wing, really right-wing intellectual, to dismantle this perception in terms of social classes, to replace it by an idea of individual autonomy, idea of which means individual responsibility, produced a new perception of the social world in which the very existence of social classes have been denied, have been erased, have been suppressed. And class antagonism, class struggle as a political reality has supposedly disappeared. There were not anymore such thing as a working class, but no, there were not such thing as social classes, but only a huge middle class in which everybody was inscribed, except the richest and the most destitute. This was a way, of course, for the social democratic parties to justify the dismantlement of a welfare state, the public sector, the public health system, the public system of pension, everything that was public, everything that was intended to help people, to support people, to assist people, has been completely dismantled. And now being more and more dismantled, don't know, probably here, but in France, through our wonderful government who massacred its population. When they protest against this dismantlement, the health system has been so violently dismantled in the past years that there were not enough beds in the hospital at the beginning of the pandemic because they closed the beds, they closed sectors, they suppressed jobs, nurses, doctors, whatever. And suddenly, we are surprised by this pandemic, we could not anticipate it. They could have anticipated to react to the possibility of a pandemic by not suppressing this, dismantling this public sector. And during the pandemic, they continued to suppress jobs, beds, sectors, and so on. This is incredible, but I can tell you that it is true. The ideology of meritocracy has been here the tool of their destructive politics, and you find it as well in Macron's reforms or in Thomas Piketty's writings, when he says that they are, in his book on capitals in the 20th century, that they are against the laziness of thought of some left-wing intellectual, that we have to reaffirm that they are fair inequalities based on work and merit. This is incredible. This is a right-wing ideology which has been applauded as the renewal of the left thought. And I did not buy this renewal, and I think we have to oppose that kind of. In this book, it does not use the word class once, not once. As I wrote in Returning to Reims, Rückkehr nach Reims, the dissolution of the working class as a powerful mobilized force and collective force pushed people to despair and anger. The feeling of powerlessness, but also people try. This was the side effect, the second effect of this dismantlement of the social class, the working class as a collective group by the ideological attempt of the so-called left-wing, social democratic left-wing, to dismantle the idea of class. The side effect has been that people anger, feeling of powerlessness, but also an attempt by these people to reconstitute themselves as a group, as a collective force, through, unfortunately, the vote for the right-wing parties, the far right-wing parties, and Marine Le Pen won 22% in the first round of the presidential election, and more than 35, she was defeated, but 35% of the French voters voted for her. So we can see that here there is still a we and a them. Chantal has mentioned the opposition of we, and then the agonistic politics she advocates is always grounded on the opposition of we and them. But when I was a kid, a child, we under them, that was spoken every day in my family, was we the workers, we the poor, against the bourgeoisie, the boss, the rich, and the exploiters. And there is still we under them, but it's now we the French deprived of our territory by them, the migrants. So the meaning of a we under them can, even in the same social class, the same social urban area, can change. And of course, if the meaning is we, the workers, and becomes we, the French, the meaning is not exactly the same, and the political consequences of this transformation of the meaning of this we and them, of course, the political consequences are really, really different, and we have to know that we and them are not categories of politics that we can rely on without interrogate them. I don't mean, I'm not criticizing Chantal saying so, because I know that she agrees with me, of course. I hope so. We know each other so well that we can joke. To conclude these few scattered remarks, I would like to tell that I do not believe in the idea of assembly as a totalizing concept for a totalizing agonistic idea of gathering. I don't, for example, think that the concept of the 99% versus against the 1% as Occupy Wall Street is relevant. Although the people included in this 99% had the same interest and did belong to the same class. And it's a kind of mythology that there is with the 99%, because 99% means that there are people whose incomes are very, very high and people whose income are very, very low. And I don't think they can gather together in New York City at Occupy Wall Street or in France at Nuit Debout to defend the same interest. I have to say that 1,000 PhD students in New York City saying we are the people, 300 PhD students on Place de la République at Nuit Debout saying we are the people. I'm on their side, of course, but I have to say that they are not the people. And while they were saying so, the people, working class people, precarized working class people, unemployed, getting precarized and temporary jobs, they were going to vote for Marine Le Pen in the north of France, in the east of France, in the south of France. They were the people. And unfortunately, the people, I'm on the side of course, Nuit Debout and the PhD students. I was there, I supported them, but I have to tell that they were not the people. And if we built mythologies saying that a few hundred PhD students are, my students too, are the people, I would say that it would be really, really misleading, and we are not going to win battles against the far right wing by denying the obvious reality. We know that one of the main vectors of the reproduction of social classes, Pierre Bourdieu has demonstrated that extensively 40 years ago, is the education, the school system, the educational system, and the possession of a cultural capital. And we know the maps are strikingly eloquent. The vote for the National Front in France is exactly located in the areas where the level of education, how long people go to frequent the school system, is the lower. The lower you go to school, the shortest time you go to school, the lower level of degree you get, and the higher number of votes for the National Front is related to that. It's exactly the same map. If you see the two maps, it's really striking. So if you are a PhD student, you don't say, I am the people, because uneducated people, not because they lack work and merit, as Piketty would say, but because they are destitute, living in a destitute areas, getting precarious jobs. Have you seen this wonderful movie these two wonderful movies by Ken Loach? Sorry I Missed You, the last one, and I, Daniel Blake. You see in these movies what it means to be precarized, to be destitute, to be subjected to state violence, administrative violence. And you also understand why it is so difficult and nearly impossible for precarized workers to mobilize, to organize, to demonstrate. Because you don't, to mobilize oneself, you have to have a future. If you don't have a future, because you don't even have a present, you cannot go to a demonstration. You cannot think of another future because you don't have one. I mentioned at the beginning of my talk the feminist movement and the black movement and the working class movement. I said that they tend to build monothetic framework. I don't mean that we have to choose one or the other. There was a misunderstanding or misinterpretation of my book Rückkehr nach Reims when it was published in Germany and in Austria. It was like I was denouncing what they call here identity politics. I don't know what it is, but every time I give an interview to a German or Austrian newspaper, the first question, what do you think of identity politics? I go, I don't know what it is. I know that there are political movements against injustice, against oppression, against discriminations, against inequalities. But I cannot call that identity because people are not fighting for identities, but, for example, for justice. You mentioned Assa Traoré, the leader of the Comité Adama, the main anti-racist movement in France, kind of today iconic figure, activist of the anti-racist movement. She does not fight for black identity. She fights against the destitution, the suppression of public sector in the suburbs, the police violence to which the young people in the suburbs are subjected, the police control everywhere, the inequalities and so on. It's not identity. And the view that it's been disseminated of my book, I was against identity politics and advocating a politics only focused on working class issues. But I was saying that the left abandoned the working class. And this explains why the working class is now, because they were abandoned them back, and they are now voting for the right-wing and far-right-wing. I did not say that I want only a working class movement and the disappearance of the feminist movement, the LGBT movement. Florian reminded that I wrote a book, Réflexion sur la question gay, Reflections on gays. I participate to the Gay Pride Parade in Paris every year, and I go to the demonstration or rally organized by the Comité Adama and the anti-racist movement. And I go to the demonstration of the Yellow Vest, which is something we can discuss. We do not have to choose between different movements, working class or the other movement I mentioned. I don't mean that we have to choose one or another, but also I don't think that it is easy to put all these movements together. And here I will disagree with Chantal. We had a discussion in Madrid, and at the end of the discussion, I told her, we do agree on everything, but we do disagree on everything too. And I think that both things are true. And I don't accept the idea of left-wing populism because for me, every movement has its own claim, not only its own claim, its own traditions and its own temporality. You cannot put these temporalities together as though his story was one great flux in which everything is united. There are different, heterogeneous, disjuncted, if I can say so, temporalities, which cannot reconcile themselves. So the temporalities can do that at some point. And we cannot erase the differences and the specificities of each movement. We have to accept them, to accept the differences, to accept the multiplicity, to accept the heterogeneity, which means not only, because we can say we accept the heterogeneity, but let's go together on Place de la République, or I don't know the name of the square here, or in Berlin, or in London. But we cannot say that, because you cannot be on the same square if you have so different interests. Except at some moments, and we know, for example, in Ukraine, in Spain with Podemos, but the result of that is that today Podemos is losing votes, while Vox, the far right-wing party, is getting more and more votes in the working class areas. So we have to think that if we say we the people, and you try to unite different people, we have not only heterogeneity, but conflict between these people. Chantal mentioned the slogan of the people against the oligarchy. In Spain, la patria, el pueblo contra la casta, la patria contra la casta, because left-wing populism is a populism in which you obviously have left-wing people, right-wing people, far right-wing people. If you want to have the people, la patria contra la casta, the people against the oligarchy, you will have people. And if you want to surpass the old notion of the right and the left, you will have people of the right as well as of the left. And we can see today in France demonstrations in which, again, anti-vax or anti-surveillance society, anti-sanitary pass and so on, in which far left-wing people, Antifa, France Insoumise, I support Jean-Luc Mélenchon, I vote for France Insoumise, but I disagree with them on not only this issue, but so many issues. I still vote for them because we can vote for a party. If you vote for a party with which you totally agree, you will not vote for anybody. But you have also far right-wing people, anti-Semites, showing anti-Semitic posters, disgusting anti-Semitic posters. And how is it possible for people of the France Insoumise, a movement which I support, to go to a demonstration with these horrible people? So they justify it. This is the people demonstrating together, united, and building the very notion of a people. No, I do not want that. I do not accept that. I don't want to be the people with these people. Agonistic gatherings. Yeah, okay. I finish here. To the notion of left-wing populism, I would like to open the notion of a new spirit of 68, of May 68. May 68 is a very complex movement in which in France, 10 million of working people on strike, a new feminist movement, the birth of the homosexual movement, as I said at that time, green preoccupation, ecologist, and so on. The criticability of everything, psychiatry, police, justice, law, education, and so on. So I don't want to build a myth or a mythology of May 68, but it's not a theory. What we see today is May 68 in act, because we have feminist demonstration, Extinction Rebellion for the Green Movement, we have LGBT demonstration, we have working class strikes, we have the yellow vest. So this is not a concept. This is the reality. And we have to build on this reality to build a new framework of resistance, multiple forms of resistance to multiple forms of state violence, state power, state oppression, state exploitation, and in order to build a framework, to think in a new way the social transformation in order to get more social justice. Sorry for the English.
Thank you very much. And maybe I would suggest, because you were addressed directly, so I skip my question.
I think we don't
Can
have time.
you? But please let me moderate, Chantal.
Oh, Chantal, please.
But it would be. I think it would be interesting if you would react to, because in a way you were Didier contradicted you in the end with the idea of the construction of a common will, if I understood it right, a construction of a people in a way, and it would be great if you would maybe react to that, if you agree or disagree on that.
The question is, look, we are friends for a long time, very good friends, and I mean, I don't think I've been trying to explain to Didier what I mean by left populism. He doesn't get it. He doesn't get it. And I've been insisting, saying that it's not a question of creating some kind of homogeneous. Look, I'm on really it's. I think that I'm very clear that it's not a question of putting all those demands. Obviously, there are a lot of differences, and I don't want to homogenize. I think it's a question of articulation the demands, so that there's some kind of solidarity can be created between very different demands. But look, I don't know. It's not the first time, that we've been having that discussion and I try to explain, but he doesn't get it. So what can I do? What can I do?
I can say two very short things that I do accept your idea of articulation. What I would like to ask you, say, how do we do that? And
that's the question.
That's the question. Yes,
that's the question.
And because if there is an articulation, I'd be here. I support the articulation, and I'm part of different movement, and so I embody a kind of articulation. But I'm afraid that we are not that many to embody this articulation, and that the movements are separate, different, specific, and it's not easy to reconcile them. I know that...
It's not a question of reconciling, but look, the example that I gave, and I think that the joint demonstration between the gilets jaunes, between the Comité Adama, and the ecological movement.
Yes, I was there.
Exactly, but it's not a question of reconciling them. They are with their specific demand, but they are moments in which some kind of solidarity is created among people with different demands.
There are moments, you're right, there are moments.
But this is the only thing I'm saying. I mean,
so we do agree.
Okay, we agree then. All right.
There is one other point, because you mentioned the affects in politics, and I do agree with you. But one of the prominent members of France Insoumise, a member of the parliament, François Ruffin, gave as an example of the affect which can unite the people together as a collective force. And the example he gave is the patriotic support of a country for his soccer team. Okay, I don't have anything against this patriot. Yes, I do have, because as a gay man, as a gay man,
but you can't, disprove one of the by saying one member of the France Insoumise said that. Okay, I mean, I'm not responsible for.
No, I did not blame you for that. I did not blame you for that. I said that some people at France Insoumise gave this example, and as a gay man, has always felt threatened by this patriotic, masculinist enthusiast for the national soccer team, and which means also that the slogan of your Podemos,
my Podemos, like can you imagine my Podemos?
No, your Podemos.
So
you wrote a book. You wrote a book with Inigo Eribon.
If Jean-Luc Mélenchon says something like that, then I'm responsible. My God.
No, I did not say so. I said you're not. I said they gave that example. But the slogan of Podemos, not your Podemos, but this Podemos in Spain, they said, La patria contra la casta, the nation against the oligarchy. Oh, I'm afraid that if you think of a people united, it's always in the frame of a nation. And the idea of populism tends always to be a nationalist idea. And I know you're not nationalist, but the movements which were claiming themselves as populist, left-wing populist, were advocating this idea of the patrie, la patria, the nation. And for me, I don't accept the idea of the people. I want the left wing against the far right wing and the right wing. And for me, the left is internationalist, or it is not the left. And I don't mean that you are not internationalist. Of course, I know that you're international, more international than I am. But the idea of the nation against the oligarchy is, for me, a very dangerous idea, because it is exactly the words that the far right wing in France uses. They say the nation against the elite, the nation against the oligarchy, the nation against the global elite. So if a movement
Didier, look, can I stop you?
Yeah, okay.
I've never said a nation against the oligarchy. I said the people, but the question is, and that's what you can't.
Not you.
But you were, arguing against the king. I say no, but look, I know that the term "the people," some people react. What I understand with the people is a collective will. That is result from the articulation of the working class struggle, of the struggle of the feminists, of the struggle of anti-racists. This is a collective will, which is the articulation of a sort of democratic demand. That's what I understand by the people. It's not the nation. It's an articulation of, and basically it's a question of is a transversal subject, precisely. Look, in fact, the question about left populism, you understand it better. If you say, first, I think, as I say, my position is a dissociative conception of the political. It's both a frontier, there's always this a frontier. People might disagree with that, many people do, but that's l'argument. But of course, this frontier can be created in different ways, obviously. Yes, obviously. And right-wing populism, but I'm saying, I think that the only way to fight against right-wing populism is by constructing another way of the people. Here I think that Spinoza say the only way to displace an affect is by constructing a stronger affect. I very much agree with that. I think we need to, if we want to displace the affect which a right-wing populism built, we need to create it's not by argument and saying, that. No, it's by constructing a stronger affect. And a stronger affect orientating deuxièmement towards social justice, towards internationalism, but it's a question of affect can be mobilized in different ways. And we need on the left to understand the power of affect, because I think that is one of the main problems with the left. The left is much too rationalistic. They believe, mobilizing affect, this is what the right wing and the fascists do. We only use argument. I think that, again, Spinoza say, argument, ideas have got force when they meet affect. If ideas by themselves, and by the way, Bourdieu says something similar.
Yeah, I do agree.
So we've got...
may I...
Fine. No, but...
Did I disagree with the idea that... Did I disagree with the idea that affects are very important in politics?
May I ask a question? Just so because I guess you both agree, and I understand that you stressed this yourself, that to create a movement that would change the course of things, it's necessary to include people that at the moment, for example, might be on the right wing. So how to so in a way how to deal with the problem then that it actually needs an inclusion, that it actually needs something that brings people to reconsider, I guess, their positions, and not just say, okay, well, as you don't do, and you stress it. But I wonder, with what you say, how would you imagine this to happen?
I know that during a strike, for example, in a factory, there are left-wing workers and right-wing workers united together in the strike, more left-wing, but some are right-wing. But this is a temporary moment when the elections are here. The right-wing workers will vote for the right-wing or the far right-wing, and the left-wing ones will vote less and less for the left-wing parties. But the problem is not a strike, or it's to build a framework in which you consider that people can be together. And I know that the affects are very important. I wrote about that. What kind of... in a Rückert nach Reims, I mentioned that, how my parents were mobilized by affect, anger against the powerful people, and how there was a shift in these affects. And today we can see, for example, Qui a tué mon père, Who Killed My Father, by Edouard Louis. His father, who was a factory worker, who had his back destroyed by an accident in the factory, used to vote for the left wing, now vote for Marine Le Pen. And the affect here is infuriated against everything, the powerful people. He says we need a revolution. And there are affects, but we cannot accept the affect. We have to build new affect through, Chantal, through a theoretical framework which give a new meaning to the reality and to the life that people really live and experience, and the social violence that they experience. And we did not. I spoke too. I know too long. I did not mention. I only mentioned the yellow vest, and the yellow vest was very, very. It was a movement. It was not peaceful. The first demonstration where they did not say we want consensus, we want discussion. They destroy everything they could find on their way, Arc de Triomphe, shops, and so on. I would say that I cannot blame them for that. You can replace the window of a shop, but you cannot replace people who has their back broken by the violence of the harshness of their working conditions. So it was a counter-violence, social counter-violence. I'm not a violent person, but I do not blame them to express their anger through this violent demonstration. And today, but of course, some people say they are homophobic somewhere, they are anti-Semite somewhere, but Assa Traoré, the anti-racist movement, went to a demonstration of the yellow vest. I do not support the yellow vest. I am a yellow vest. And the meaning of the yellow vest is what you do, what you say. If you let, of course, the far right-wing people saying this is because of the Jews governing the world, and so, of course, and if Assa Traoré, some queer activists, some member of the Green Party, prominent member of the Green Party, go there and say, we are the yellow vest, we are. And the meaning of the movement changed. So here it's not only about affects, it's about the theoretical framework. And the theoretical framework, and I think when Bourdieu speaks about affects, and which is...
Look, first, I'm not speaking about mobilizing affects, but I speak of idées affectantes, the articulation of ideas with affect. I'm not saying that we just only need to mobilize affect without, having a framework. Of course, we need a framework, but the framework is not enough because, for instance, let's say in the left, people. I'm thinking, for instance, a discussion I had in Britain. They believe that the main question is you need to have a good program. If you have a good program, then people are going to follow. I say, no, that's not enough. You need to have a program that speaks to people. That people feel, that this program has got something to do with their situation, with what they want. So I'm not saying just mobilize affect. I think, but look,
when I say theoretical framework, when I say theoretical framework, I mean, for example, to reaffirm that there are social classes and there are social class struggle. There are a conflict between classes. And this is a theoretical framework in which people can create the affect as member of... my parents had affect as members of the social, of the working class. They were communists. They have affect of members of the... If you dismantle this theoretical framework, which is also political framework, the affect that my parents kept on feeling were completely transformed into something which has nothing to do anymore with social classes, but to belonging to a country against people who are invading the country. So the framework here is the ground of the affect. The theoretical framework is the ground of the affect. Of course you are.
Of course. Okay,
it's the reason why I said we do agree with.
Okay, so in fact I don't really see. Shall we open the floor?
Yeah.
I'm not sure it will help, but we, and not because of the question. not because of the question, but so yes, this is a chance to ask a question not by typing it into the computer, but live. So if you still want to do that, it would be great. Here's a question right in the first row. Please wait for the microphone because we stream, and so otherwise you cannot be heard.
Bonsoir. What I understood from Mrs. Mouffe is that you're talking about a society that people understand that other peoples have the right and the will and the need to demonstrate for whatsoever and to protest against whatsoever. And I think that the fact that neoliberalism just destroyed any feeling of community creates what you say. So I don't see such an opposition between your positions.
But there is no basic difference between our positions.
Exactly.
I mean,
so I don't understand why you repeat it all the time that you have a different position.
We suppose the same movement.
Because
we vote for this.
I would love to go on and to talk about how can we overcome this situation that people lost completely this sense of community because this ideology or this, I don't know how you would call it, of neoliberalism, capitalism, and consumerism just destroyed this sense of understanding the other in his need to demonstrate or to stand up for his right. This is what I take from what you said. Yes.
Yeah, but this is why I think what I call agonistic assemblies. I mean, I agree with Didier. I'm against this kind of idea of consensus and that. But I will not, because for me, assemblies are places where affects are mobilized. They can be mobilized in the wrong way or in a way that, but they can also be mobilized in a positive way, you know. And I think, for instance, that Didier was saying, and I in fact I gave as an example as a positive example of creating. The demonstration in which the Comité Adama was, and the Yellow Vest, and I think that's exactly, you know, and this is, I also insisted that when I was speaking of assemblies, I was not thinking only of, you know, occupation. I was saying form of demonstration, and I think this for me, I think that this demonstration was a form of assembly, but a form of an agonistic assembly in which different groups came with their different demands. What was at stake was not, you know, let's try to all find a way to agree, no, but to articulate their struggles so that they could, at the moment, they have a common adversary, because for me it's absolutely crucial, you know, to have in politics about us and them. So in order to create an us, even a temporary us, you need to have a them. You need to be against people. So, and I think that agonistic assemblies for me are places precisely where people can get together, get to know each other, and confront themselves. And in fact, in many of the reunion of the Yellow Vest, for instance, they were saying that for them it was really important because this is a place when they met at the rond-point, you know, they could really get you know, to understand and see other demands. I mean, I think that this is there is no theoretical solution to that.
I wanted to add something.
Maybe can I get another question?
Okay.
Practices, you know.
If you could wait, because we get another question, so we get a little bit, if there's another question.
Well, I was wondering, because I feel like you, Professor Eribon, were basically referring, or I also read Retour à Reims, Rückkehr nach Reims, as kind of a pledge to remobilize class identity in order to overcome the neoliberal predicament. I might be wrong or not, but I feel like where I was wondering if, like, and maybe you have to say something about that, or someone else here has to say something about that. I was wondering if, like, an idea of agonistic assemblies could not rather be a stage to acknowledge that class identities under the influence of, like, if you want to put it as neoliberal ideology or whatnot, is something that has basically vanished and has to be reinvented in new ways, in forms of new articulations. And I would like to ask you two if like you can think of, or if you have any conceptions of like a way to kind of steady those, for example, demonstrations in which different groups sort of articulate their demands together. Because I feel like what would be necessary would be kind of a coalition or articulation that holds up for a longer moment in time than one demonstration, right? So how to like steady an assembly in a way, how to provide a framework in which those articulations can form a counter-hegemony, kind of, is, I guess, something I would like to hear your thoughts
you
on.
wanted to speak.
I did not say working class identity. I say the feeling of belonging to a collective, mobilized or mobilizable, political, social force. And this is what has been dismantled. And not only because of the social democrat parties and the left-wing, right left-wing intellectual, but also because of the transformation of the economics. When I can say something personal, when my mother was a worker in a factory in the 70s, in this factory there were 1,700 workers, male and female. 500 of these workers were members of the CGT, the trade union close to the Communist Party. There were strikes, massive strikes, fight with the police at the gate of the factory, and so on. Today, the factory has been closed for 10 years, maybe more, and you can wonder, where is this? Where are the workers? They are dead, of course. My mother is dead now. But where are their children, their grandchildren? And overall, where are the cards of membership of the trade union? Because people don't work in this kind of huge factories. They are unemployed. They can get precarious jobs. They can in Amazon warehouses or Deliveroo or Uber drivers or whatever. So how can you imagine to rebuild a sense of solidarity between people who are isolated? Because if you are unemployed, you are isolated, you don't work with other people, you cannot mobilize with other people. So the sense of solidarity is lost. And how can we think of associations, trade union, political parties, and this is not the Socialist Party and a new candidate, Anne Hidalgo, they will not be the one who rebuilds this sense of working class solidarity or social justice. They will send the police, riot police against them, people who want to demonstrate. But so this sense of solidarity, these people who are unemployed don't go to what you call assembly, agonistic. And on the contrary, you can see that if you have different movements on the same square, the agonistic movement, the agonistic thing will be between the different movements. In May 68, the working class movement expelled the gay people who wanted to demonstrate with them. They expelled feminists who wanted to demonstrate with them. So there is always not a sense of community which unites these movements, but the agonism, the conflict is not all these people together against neoliberalism, but it is between them. The masculinist members of the working class movement, against the feminists or the gay people. It's not that easy to think that the conflict, the agonism, is against an enemy, and to unite these people, all this movement together. The specificity of these movements means also that they conflict between each other. And this is what we have to take into account if you want to reflect on the assembly, the sense of community. You can imagine I'm in favor of the sense of community, the sense of solidarity. But it's not that easy to build. And sense of solidarity, it's precisely what the neoliberal politics and reforms have dismantled. People who were in the idea of the institution of social solidarity has been dismantled. So people are left isolated, and they express, when they are working class, precarized working class people, they express their anger by abstaining. They don't vote, most of them, or if they vote for the National Front. So to build a sense of solidarity is a challenge that we have to think about. And I'm afraid I don't have an answer to give you. I'm afraid that I would like that Chantal have one, but I'm afraid that both of us don't have the answer.
Thank you very much for the talk. First of all, it was very interesting. I find the idea of the agonism very interesting, and I was wondering, it's like a question for you more, Chantal Mouffe, because you were talking and writing about conflictual consents. Where would you say would you draw the line for this consent? And who draws the line, or what happens if there are members in an assembly who are anti-human rights, for example, if human rights are the conflictual consents itself? If the question makes sense. Like, who decides what the conflictual consent is if there are different members in the assembly, and would you say that this consensus is like a fixed one, or is it part of an agonistic discussion itself?
So are there limits to an
Yeah, well, no, of course. Look, the question is that first, when I speak of conflictual consensus, I'm not thinking of an assembly. This is in the context of my reflection on democracy, because I think that I don't want to enter too much into that, but my argument is that when in the dissociative conception, when you know that they are necessarily antagonism, people that. The question is that is it possible still to find ways in which we can live in common and to have a society in which some form of democracy are possible, because that is my long fight with Habermas. Habermas say if you insist on the idea that there is antagonism, then you cannot imagine creation of democracy. Democracy requires that we say that there is no antagonism or no conflict that cannot have a rational solution. So, but it's not. I don't want to give you a very long explanation about that because it would take me too long. But basically, it's my reflection about conflictual consensus is about what kind of consensus is possible that make room for dissensus, because I do agree that if we want to live together, we need to have some form of consensus. In fact, even if you are going to have the discussion, you need to have something on which you agree, and then you can disagree about things. So my contention about that is that in democratic societies, in liberal democratic societies, in our societies, with our understanding, of democracy, there are what I call ethico-political principles that we share. I was speaking about, for instance, well, probably that's the best way to enter into your question. I was speaking about the question of citizenship, okay? I think that, and my idea of an agonistic citizenship means that, well, there is something on which we agree, the ethico-political principle being, for instance, in our societies, liberty and equality for all. Those are the principles that need to be accepted in order to speak of a real, modern democracy. But liberty and equality for all, it's evident that there are many different understandings of that. People are going to understand liberty in one way, equality, and big question, particularly today, who's part of the whole, because it's never absolutely. So there are limits. And this is what I call a conflictual consensus. We agree that those are the principles that need to be, our ethico-political principles, but we are going to disagree about the way they should be interpreted and about the kind of institution, the way they are going to be institutionalized. The agonistic struggle, as I understand it, at that level, is about that. It means that there are possibilities, and what I also speak of agonistic pluralism. There is, of course, the agonism is plural, but it's a question. We need to have things that unite us, but at the same time we need to have the possibility of dissensus. But of course, it means that they are people who are not going to be part of that. There are people who will say, no, but those are not the principle of, that imagine, for instance, obviously the Taliban will not agree about that. They want to organize the society but those they can't be part of the agonistic struggle, of course. They are limited to the agonistic struggle. Those are, enemies, if you want. So not all conflict can be transformed into an agonistic one. And I think your question about people disagreeing. Well, by the way, that was quite interesting. You probably remember. Well, you were not there, Florian, but when Miloro organized this General Assembly, the Schaubühne, no, the question was. Okay, bring together people to discuss. What Milo had not envisaged, it was the fact that some of the people were representative. In fact, there was this guy from Turkey who in fact, he did not even accept the basic principle. He was really putting in defending a view which was not acceptable, not easy, because you can imagine there are many different ways in which you can understand, but there are also things that are off limit. And how are you going to deal with those people? It's a big question. And in fact, this question at Milo had to reach, because at some point it was quite interesting, this thing, because he at some point decided, okay, let's have a vote. I mean, are we going to keep that person in our assembly or not? The vote was, no, he can't stay. He's got to go. But then, of course, some people complain, that, it was undemocratic to have ejected that person, so that person should be called back. There are really those. there is no rational solution to that problem. And in fact, the same thing, for instance, is what are the limits of the agonistic struggle? A big discussion that some ways in Germany, some ways are right-wing populists. Should they be part of the agonistic struggle, or should they be considered as enemies? Well, there the question, the way I will deal with that will be, okay, do they reject the basic principle of liberty of equality for all, or do they defend some interpretation of those principles that we don't really like, that we disagree with, but let's say they are borderline, And I think and then of course the basic problem is that how do you deal with those things? I think that to that question there are only pragmatic solutions, because there is no way when you could decide, those are rational, they are pragmatic. Then I will say, okay, what's the best thing should we exclude those people, and in practice, for instance, I say, should we make the Rassemblement National, illegal or not? No. Or there was a discussion in Germany, in fact, about the one of those Nazi group. So those are in many cases. I will say it depends. I think that. Is it better to keep them inside, and because at least it's a way to force them to maybe, play the game of democracy, maybe in an hypocritical, but at least you are able to contain them, because if you exclude them, probably they'll go into, you call that in English, underground or things like that. So, but those are discussions, and I will say that this is the same thing. When in an assembly, you've got people that you consider are not really, accepting the basic consensus, even if it's one that we agree could be, because obviously if you have the idea of human rights, there are many different ways in which human rights are more important. There is a whole discussion about that. But if you have somebody who definitively say, no, human rights doesn't exist, well, of course, in that case, I don't think there is a space for people like that in the assembly. But usually things are not so clear. It's just, as I say, it's borderline. I mean, yeah, that human right, but we think so. Honestly, I think that there is no rational solution to those questions. It's basically a pragmatic thing. What is better for our society to, accept those people, force them to play by our rules, or exclude them. But I agree with you. Those are questions which really, can happen.
Yeah, I guess we are at the core of many of the problems we have at the moment. Like, in a way, whom to include into a common struggle, who to exclude, when is the line drawn, who can be part of the chain of equivalence, who cannot be part of it. In a way, I guess that's the core question, and it could.
For the chain of equivalence, I don't think it's a problem, because obviously for the chain of equivalence, no, I mean it's clearer. Because, for instance, it's obvious I would never going to accept right-wing populists into my chain of equivalence.
But when it's so clear, but I think, as we know from many discussions at the moment, there are many things that are more, as you said, things are often not that clear-cut. So I think we are at the moment where we can now discuss another hour, because this is like really the point, I think, of many political discussions at the moment. Exclusion, non-exclusion, who is part of it, who can say we, he's not part of we, etc. So this we leave for many other editions of the Art of Assembly. And
or maybe another thing which will not be a new, different program.
Of course, yeah. I'm egoistic now, so I'm talking about this series. And no, it's the discussion anyway, so it's maybe good to end up, and you kind of clearly brought it to the point where we are at the core of many of these discussions at the moment. So we stop it here to leave a cliffhanger for many other discussions.
Can I ask you a last question?
Question.
Just a question. Would you invite in your series a far right-wing ideologist, racist, anti-migrants? No, I hope no. So we have to exclude them of
but we have
the debate.
I said, it's an interesting discussion because, but you would like the example of the artistic works, and I think the context, the time, the moment play a role. The Milo Raus General Assembly.
I would not go in a public discussion in a TV show, for example, with someone. And if we refuse to go to talk show on the TV, on the radio, with far right-wing people, they would stop to invite them, and we would get rid of them. And
you are very optimistic.
Yes, I am.
Also, I think the problem.
Stop inviting you.
The problem might be also.
I don't go anyway. I don't like to go, so I don't go.
Only.
The problem is where it starts. So, as I said, this will be because then
it's a big discussion.
Often things are not that clearly cut. So yes, we will. This discussion.
Sorry to launch another discussion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, thank you very much, Didier Eribon, Chantal Mouffe. Thank you for coming. And I would just maybe there will be counter positions already on Saturday in Berlin, but also on a live stream when we have Judith Butler and Max Haven, who will probably have a different view on Occupy and the relevance of Occupy today. So there will be a delayed controversy on this, I guess. So maybe if you want to have a look at it. Thank you again, Chantal Mouffe and Didier Eribon, and thanks for coming.